24th of August, the number of the day is 16 in this case, Aakash. We're talking about the rand and 16 to the dollar, or there or thereabouts.
Yeah, in fact, slightly below 16 to the dollar. It's been hovering just under 16 to the dollar, the best rate it's been in about 3 or 4 months. And that's generally very good news for South Africans.
Why is it happening?
It's happening because last week the US decided to buy back some of their debt. It's kind of like you take a home loan that you financed, and now you refinance the finance that you took.
Oh.
And that in turn has weakened the dollar. And there's a number of factors why the dollar is weakening, but one has to do with the fact that there's a lot of people who don't feel as confident about the American economy and buying American debt, because that debt is sitting at just over 40 trillion US dollars.
Is that because of the political situation?
Well, they just, like South Africans, like we do, they borrow a lot more money to fund their expenses. So they're always borrowing money to make ends meet. And let me just put this into context as to just how much money the Americans have borrowed at 40 trillion. South Africa raises about 2 trillion rands every year, right? So 40 trillion works out to about 320 trillion rand. That's kind of, from the day that Jan van Riebeck arrived, the total amount of taxes that we collect this year, 2 trillion, over that period of time since van Riebeck arrived, is how much the Americans now owe. 40 trillion US dollars. That's a lot of money.
Thus the weaker dollar.
People are saying, we're not really sure about how sustainable this is. That's number one. Number two, we've spoken about the tech companies in America, and they're borrowing a lot of money. And where would you rather put your money right now if you were an investor in a US government under Donald Trump that has 40 trillion in debt versus advanced AI companies? And people are going towards the corporate sector, not government.
Everybody can get a piece of that, and they know exactly what's happening there. Can you explain to me, like I'm a muggle, very quickly, strong rand, weaker dollar? Are we only strong because the dollar is weak, or are we stronger anyway?
Yeah, well, that's a very interesting perspective, because we mustn't get carried away with the stronger rand. It's not like we're doing something right. And if you think about it, our economy is barely growing, probably about 1% per annum. We have unemployment at ridiculously high levels. We have a government deficit, a budget deficit, where we're borrowing a lot more than we are raising in taxes. So all put together, the South African economy is not doing great, but the rand is not strengthening because we are doing something right. It's strengthening because America, one could argue, is doing something that's not particularly great.
What does it mean for the average SAFA? What do I do with it?
Yeah, so it's good. It's good because it means when we buy oil and we buy petrol and we buy diesel, we pay a lot less because the rand is stronger. It also means, as a result, that generally prices go down. That in turn could result in lower interest rates if you have borrowed money at some point. Of course, if you've got money in the bank, lower interest rates is not necessarily a good thing. But that's a subject for another day.
And the low interest rates in the bank, not always a good thing for those who are fortunate enough to invest, whether it's a small amount or a large amount. But I always think when we all want the lower interest rates because of our home loans and our cars and us muggles. Those that have the offshore investments, however, they don't want the lower interest rates actually, and we forget about those people.
Yeah, and it's if you have money offshore, especially in dollars right now, it's a great time to go sit with your financial advisor, because the long-term outlook against the US dollar is weaker. So some people, even in South Africa, I mean, the medium-term outlook for the rand versus the dollar, somewhere between 15.50 to about 16 to the dollar. By 2030, potentially 14 against the dollar. So if you've taken money offshore, you are betting on two things. You're betting on probably those companies that you've invested on doing well, but you've also bet on the fact that the rand may weaken, and when you bring your money back, you'd also have a bit of a boost. Well, that situation may not necessarily be as true going forward. So it's a great time to sit with your financial advisor and say, listen, the dollar is looking weaker in the longer term. Is this where I still need to be?
And is this where I need to be in a couple of years' time? Let's get ahead of this particular curve. I always like to say before I land the plane, but because we're talking rands and dollars in this case, before we take my ATM card out the machine for this edition of the show, does any of this, the rand at the moment, going to impact the interest rate hikes potentially later in the year? Do they look at that, or is it just too early?
Look, in South Africa, inflation was rising, right? And it was rising for a number of different reasons, including the fact that we were paying a lot more for oil. And there are two factors that impact on the oil price. It's the rand-dollar exchange rate, and it's the price of oil itself. The price of oil currently is still hovering around 90, so that's not really great for us. But the stronger rand certainly helps. So it may lessen the impact of those increases. But certainly from a South African perspective, inflation is a lot higher than the 3% that the Reserve Bank would like it to be.
So we're going to leave it for today. So the rand is the number of the day, the rand hovering around 16 to the US dollar. But as Aakash says, a strong rand is not necessarily because we're doing something right. It could also have to do with a weaker dollar. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.